Every hunt meant life or death. You crouch in low, icy mud. Your rifle shakes in cold fingers. Snow falls fast, hiding tracks. Your stomach knots with hunger. You haven't eaten in days. But the deer in front of you can smell fear. One wrong move and it bolts, leaving you to starve in the wilderness. This was the daily life for mountain men. They played by nature's rules or paid the price. They depended entirely on skill, grit, and mastering deadly tactics handed down through generations. And every hunt was a risk. Some set traps, some stalked for miles. Others turned fire, water, and the land into tools. But how did they hunt animals that knew every hiding spot? And were there any special tricks frontiersmen used to hunt game? To understand how frontier hunters survived, we have to look at the men who laid the groundwork. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Number 1. Robert Beverly's Early Hunting Tactics. Before we get into the hunting tactics of the 1800s frontiersmen, we need to go back further, back to the earliest American hunters. These were men who had no choice but to watch and learn from native hunters, who could track like wolves and move like shadows. You see, before mountain men roamed the frontier, survival hunting was already an art refined by Native Americans, and later, early colonists. The natives, quick and sharp-eyed, tracked game with skill unmatched by European settlers. Those settlers who couldn't afford to trade for native hunters had to learn fast. They adapted, borrowing techniques and adding their own twists. For instance, Robert Beverly, a Virginia planter from the early 1700s, documented these methods, which set the foundation for the hunting tactics that would define frontier survival. Now, one trick was the stalking head. Hunters hid behind a decoy, often an animal's head mounted on a stick, slowly creeping close enough to fire. Some trained their horses to walk beside them, using the animal as a living shield to stay hidden. Others felled trees in strategic spots, waiting behind them while deer came to browse. Then there were the impaling stakes, sharp wooden spears placed where deer regularly jumped fences. A single leap and the animal was done. Hares, on the other hand, were hunted on foot with fast mongrel dogs. If dogs couldn't catch them outright, they drove them up hollow trees. Once cornered, hunters lit fires at the base, smoking the animals out until they dropped. It was quick and efficient. Night hunts, however, were a different game. Small, sharp-nosed dogs flushed out raccoons, opossums, and foxes, especially in cornfields. But darkness was dangerous. Bigger dogs came along, ready to fend off wolves, bears, and wildcats. Hunters moved fast, trusting their hounds' barks to lead them straight to the kill. And then there was turkey hunting, which required patience and traps. One hunter built a cage that snared 17 turkeys at once, though he couldn't figure out how to reset it without emptying it first. As for fishing, that was a whole other skill set. The natives' weirs and barriers that funneled fish into traps were copied and refined by settlers. Seines, nets, hand lines, and even long spill yards stretched across rivers with hooks dangling every few feet, pulled in haul after haul. And although early hunters adapted, the mountain men of the 1800s took things further, turning silence into a weapon. Number 2. Steel hunting. Now, mountain men didn't charge through the woods whooping and hollering like European aristocrats on a fox hunt. That kind of racket got you nothing but an empty stomach. Out here, hunting was all about patience, silence, and knowing how to disappear into the land. Still, hunting meant you had to become a shadow. If you moved too fast, you spooked the game. Step wrong and snap a twig cost you dinner. A true hunter crept slow, pausing often to listen, eyes scanning for the flick of an ear or movement of a shadow. So it wasn't luck that brought a kill, it was skill. Henry Herbert, writing in 1864, called it so difficult that even a sharp-eyed apprentice would need years under a seasoned woodsman to get it right. And he wasn't wrong. Dawn was the best time. Wet grass softened footsteps. The woods were just waking up. The hunter moved cautiously, reading the land like a book. Tracks in the mud, rub marks on a tree, a fresh bed where a deer had lain overnight. The goal was to get close enough for a clean shot before the animal even knew he was there. A good steel hunter knew where to look. He avoided well-trodden paths where game had learned to stay wary, It tracked footprints as well as their meaning. For instance, a straight line of prints meant a buck was on the move. If tracks were tightening and winding, it indicated the same buck was searching for a bedding spot. The best knew how to read every detail, and when a herd was in sight, the sharpest marksman aimed for the leader. Drop the dominant animal first, and the rest hesitated, just long enough for another shot. Waste a bullet and you were left tracking a wounded beast through miles of rough country. A clean kill was the only kill that mattered. The shot had to land within a 10-inch target, heart, lungs, or spine. And even if a hunter were to chase it through miles of brush, he'd only find the meat ruined by the sour taste of fear and pain. However, if it was the hide a man was after, then he aimed for the neck, snapping the spine in one shot, leaving the pelt unmarked. A hunter's biggest enemy, however, wasn't the cold, the terrain, or even the game itself. It was the wind. You see, a deer might not see you, it might not hear you, but if it caught your scent, the hunt was over before it began. Still, hunters moved with the wind in mind. Always upwind, or at least across it. They understood that air flowed uphill in the morning and downhill at dusk. Even the faintest whisper of wind, too soft to stir a leaf, could carry human scent straight to the buck's nostrils. And once spooked, that buck wouldn't just bolt on its own. Nope, it'd take the whole herd with it. But the forest had eyes and ears beyond the deer. Squirrels, ravens, and grouse were nature's alarm bells. A hunter that didn't know their warning cries might as well have been ringing one himself. So once again, the best hunters learned to move like ghosts, blending into the land without a trace. And they never, ever got lost. A hunter who lost his bearings wasn't a hunter. He was prey to hunger, cold, and the endless reach of wilderness. The finest frontiersmen knew every step they took, remembered every turn, and could retrace their path, whether they'd been out for an hour or a month. Even in ancient times, primitive hunters had no choice but to move in silence, creeping close enough to drop a kill with a club or a spear. Centuries later, long hunters, solitary frontiersmen who lived by their rifles. Mind you, these weren't farmers with muskets or greenhorned soldiers scrounging for extra rations. Still, hunting was for professionals, men who surrendered themselves to the land, thought like the prey, and lived by patience, precision, and skill. Even Lewis and Clark, who were hunting for men tough enough to carve a path through the West, knew one thing: you wouldn't find a still hunter among enlisted men. You found them deep in the wild, where only the best survived. So yep, still hunting wasn't easy. It took patience, sharp instincts, and a deep understanding of the wild. But those who mastered it never went hungry. However, sometimes brute force worked better than patience. Number 3. Game drives. They called it driving or surrounding, and mountain men learned it from native hunters. When the moment was right, whole groups circled up quietly around deer, elk, or even flocks of pigeons. At the signal, everyone pushed inward. Animals panicked, crowded together, nowhere to run. Hunters closed in quick, clubs swinging, arrows flying. Lewis and Clark watched an Arikara tribe pull this off in 1804. They trapped pronghorns mid-river. Young warriors dove into the water, beat animals with sticks, and dragged their kills ashore. However, this tactic goes way back, thousands of years before settlers arrived. Out west, mountain men stumbled across stone walls built by ancient hunters. These were long, low barriers that funneled herds into tight places, straight towards spears and darts waiting in ambush. Hunting parties of 20 or more could take down entire herds in one go. Buffalo jumps were another ruthless variation. Hunters would drive bison toward cliffs, and when the animals realized the danger, it was too late. The beast plunged over the edge, legs snapping on impact. Waiting tribesmen quickly finished the wounded beast below. The Blackfoot called these sites pushkin, meaning deep blood kettle. They knew that if even one buffalo escaped, the herd would learn. The next hunt would be harder. And if you're loving this episode, you'll love what else we got. We've covered the toughest mountain men, the wildest survival stories, and the lost skills that kept them alive. 9 years in the Rockies, 60 years on the frontier, harsh winters, cruel landscapes, men who survived, men who mastered the wild. Don't forget to check out the rest of the episodes on our channel. There's more waiting for you. Now, back to the hunt. One thing you should know is that the sharpest hunters hunted on their own terms. They didn't wait for their prey, which brings us to Number 4. Stalking. Stalking never failed to keep mountain men alive. They'd spot game from afar, then quietly move in using rocks, trees, and brush for cover. One wrong move, game over. You had to know the land, the wind, and how animals acted to stay unseen. Stalking goes back thousands of years. Ancient hunters of the Great Basin used this lie-in-wait method in the high mountains, waiting patiently for animals to wander close. In the early 1800s, painter George Catlin recorded Native Americans disguising themselves as wolves to hunt buffalo. Buffalo knew how to run from humans, but they stood their ground against wolves, and so hunters wore wolf skins, keeping close until it was too late. Catlin described it himself in 1844. The poor buffaloes have their enemy man, besetting and besieging him at all times of the year, and in all the modes that man in his superior wisdom has been able to devise for their destruction. They struggle in vain to evade his deadly shafts when he dashes amongst them over the plains on his wild horse. They plunge into the snowdrifts where they yield themselves an easy prey for their destroyers. And they also stand unwittingly and behold him, unsuspected under the skin of a white wolf, insinuating himself and his fatal weapons into close company when they are peaceably grazing on the level prairies and shot down before they are aware of their danger. This same trick also works when hunters use cow-shaped decoys to get close to antelope, deer, and elk. You see, animals are used to cattle and pay them no mind, but a human silhouette means danger. Breaking up your outline with something familiar can make the difference between going hungry and making the kill. Nevertheless, the biggest risk with decoys is that animals catch on quick. One mistake, one wrong move, and it's done. In open country, a hunter's best shot at getting close to otherwise unapproachable animals is with a decoy. To make this work, the hunter should approach from the side. Animals need to spot the decoy early, grow comfortable, and drop their suspicion. Then, the hunter moves slow and steady, never stop to peek or glass. Cows don't stalk, predators do. Next, the hunter keeps walking casually, naturally, like a cow with nowhere special to be. After that, the hunter picks 2 landmarks to walk between, acting as if they're just passing through. This gives animals time to relax and allows the hunter to plan the shot. Using a decoy that matches the target animal works in the same way. Nowadays, archers use hats shaped like antelope or deer heads with matching shirts. Just another disguise to fool a game. But somehow, this isn't new. Even John Smith wrote about the Powhatan hunters using deer hides with buck heads to sneak up on bucks during the rut. It worked because tribes understood their prey. Sure, it might feel ridiculous dressed up like a deer, but when survival depends on it, looking foolish is better than going hungry. Just remember, animals know their own kind best. If your disguise isn't perfect, the hunt ends before it begins. And why wait for an animal to stop when you could make it collapse from sheer exhaustion? Number 5. Relaying. Now, when horses arrived on the northern plains, tribes adapted to hunting on horseback. Mounted hunters developed a relay system to chase game like deer, elk, or pronghorns. They'd pursue the animals in shifts, running them in circles until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. Then they finished the job with arrows or clubs. In August of 1805, Lewis and Clark witnessed Lemhi Shoshone hunters attempting this technique on a herd of pronghorns, though without success. Even on good days, such hunts involved 40 or 50 hunters for half a day, often yielding only 2 or 3 antelopes. This method likely drew inspiration from wolves. Near the mouth of Marthays River in April 1805, Lewis observed wolves decoying a single animal from a flock and then pursuing it, alternately relieving each other until they made the kill. Persistence hunting wasn't unique to the northern plains. The Tarahumara people of northern Mexico, known for their exceptional endurance, practiced a form of this technique. They'd run animals like deer and wild turkeys to exhaustion over extended distances, sometimes covering up to 200 miles in 2 days. Their hunting strategy involved steady, persistent pursuit until the prey could run no more. Similarly, the Tanana Athabascans of Alaska used persistence hunting. They tracked large game such as caribou, moose, and Dall sheep over long distances, relying on endurance to exhaust the animals before making the kill. This method was essential to their survival, especially during seasonal migrations when other food sources were scarce. And the mountain men of the 1800s learned from these indigenous hunting tactics. Now, although chasing was effective to some degree, the smartest hunters let their prey come to them. Number 6. Trapping. Mountain men lived and died by trapping. Beaver pelts were a source of survival for these frontiersmen. Beaver hats were booming business back east, and these tough frontiersmen chased profit deep into the wild country. At first, traders counted on natives for furs, swapping guns and knives for pelts. But demand soared and native trappers couldn't keep up. By the 1820s, companies sent their own trappers west. These men stayed year-round, braving cold winters and harsh mountains, risking everything each day. Their gear was simple. They set heavy iron traps with double springs and short chains, the same basic design is still used today. A mountain man would spot a fresh beaver sign, wade into freezing streams, set the trap underwater, and then anchor it with a young tree cut nearby. But anchors often failed. Trappers learned fast. They'd tie a float stick to the chain, and if the anchor came loose, the stick surfaced, signaling a catch below. And once the trap was set, the mountain man baited it. Beavers fiercely guarded their territory, marking boundaries with scent from glands called casters. Trappers knew this. After killing a beaver, they'd cut out its castor glands and bottle the scent. At a new spot, the trappers smeared the foreign scent above the hidden trap. Local beavers couldn't resist investigating and stepped right into the jaws. Mountain men knew exactly what to look for: chewed trees, muddy slides, fresh scent marks. They mastered several ways to trap beaver. Foothold traps were iron jaws placed underwater, hidden just beneath the mud. Once snapped shut, escape was nearly impossible. Snares were simpler, just loops of rope or sinew set along busy beaver trails. As the animal passed through, the loop tightened, holding it fast. Then there were deadfalls, heavy logs or rocks balanced carefully above bait. One wrong move triggered a sudden, deadly drop. Timing and precision meant everything. Trappers traveled alone or in small groups, laying traps along miles of rivers and streams. Harsh weather, rough country, fierce competition. It was dangerous work. Nonetheless, the fur trade collapsed in the late 1830s as fashion changed and beaver disappeared. And so, mountain men were forced to change their ways, turning to guiding settlers west or finding new ways to survive. But back then, trapping was a unique way of life. And if you want to get deep, and if you want to go deeper, we've got a full 5-hour episode breaking down the lost secrets of frontier trapping, the setups, the bait, the tricks that meant the difference between eating and starving. Check it out after this. Now, for our final hunting technique of the episode, some hunters use the land itself as a weapon. Number 7. Burning. Occasionally, mountain men sometimes borrowed an old native tactic and set the woods ablaze. It was a basic but effective way to clear thick brush, making it easier to move quickly and track prey. By burning dry leaves and fallen timber, hunters could also drive game toward areas they controlled, boosting their odds of success. But the method had costs. Thaddeus Harris, traveling through western Pennsylvania in 1803, hated what he saw. He wrote, "We remarked with regret and indignation the wanton destruction of these noble forests. For more than 50 miles to the west and north, the mountains were burning. This is done by white hunters, who set fire to dry leaves and decayed failed timber in the valleys, in order to thin the undergrowth, that they may traverse the woods with more ease in pursuit of game. But they defeat their own object, for the fires drive moose, deer, and wild animals into the more northerly and westerly parts, and destroy the turkeys, partridges, and quails, at this season on their nests, or just leading out their broods." Yet Harris missed something important. Fire wasn't entirely destructive, for it created new life. You see, soon after a burn, fresh grass grew, richer and more nutritious, drawing wildlife back in greater numbers. Furthermore, Lewis and Clark observed the Hadasta tribe burning prairie grasslands in spring, attracting buffalo herds to feed. So yep, burning was risky, but it was also practical. Sacrifice a forest today, hunt better tomorrow. Every hunt was a fight against the land, the weather, and the prey. One wrong move meant hunger. One mistake could mean death. Mountain men knew this. They learned to think like the animals they hunted, to use the land as both a tool and a weapon. Fire, patience, stealth, endurance. Every trick came from hard experience, but the frontier is gone. The wild has changed. So here's the question. If you were out there, alone with nothing but your instincts, could you survive?